Hello and welcome to this edition of A Page from History. I am Nilanjan Mukhopadhyay. In a way, 15 years ago, the extraordinary journey of Mother Teresa came to a halt. For almost 5 decades, she was the integral part of the Indian and global consciousness. Mother Teresa's love for human beings, her assistance to the poor, the dying and destitute, was what legends were made of. Not every Indian knows even today that she was of Albanian descent and came to India when she was still in her teens. Very few also know that within a year of India attaining freedom, she decided to step outside the security of a Calcutta convent. This began a new phase in an incredible journey which ended with her death 15 years ago. Mother Teresa was a deeply religious person, but she never claimed that her way was the only right one. The more we learn about her, the more it is difficult to believe that such a life was possible. I am joined today by 3 eminent guests who will enable us to understand more about the enigma called Mother Teresa. My first guest on this program is John Dayal, a very senior journalist who has also in the last few years made a name, as talking about issues of Christian rights, minority rights, human rights. Antara, senior journalist who is also the editor and publisher of Little Magazine, a very important journal in itself. Navin Chawla, who is better known to the world as a former Chief Election Commissioner, but in this program more important for us as one of the most important biographers of Mother Teresa. I'd like to begin with you. I'd like to take you back to something that you told a journalist way back in '97 when Mother Teresa had passed away. You had said that she would be remembered in the world as someone who gave compassion, the word compassion, a completely new dimension. I'd like to begin on this particular note that 15 years down the line, how do you think that the world still remembers Mother Teresa?
I think still as a compassionate figure and somebody, whom you associate with a saint.
Right.
So we in India who have always revered holiness in any form accepted Mother as a saint in her lifetime, and that hasn't changed over these years, and nor will it, because she straddled her century like a colossus.
Right.
And so with faith and compassion her name will always be linked.
Antara, how would you want to, to begin off this discussion? How would you like to remember, recall Mother Teresa? Your first thoughts when you realized that she was no more?
Oh, that was like a personal loss.
Right.
Although I didn't know her as closely as Mr. Chawla, but I had met her a number of times over the years. And it was more, not so much because of the personal contact, but because of the emotional dependence that you have on somebody like Mother Teresa, who can actually give you hope and who can make compassion seem like it's easy to do. Which it's not actually easy what she was doing, but the way she went about it, it was like, just it's the way to do it. There is no other way. Let's just do it and don't even think about it. Let's not go into perfectionism. So it was a personal loss. I'm sure for millions it was a personal loss.
Sure. John Dayal, how would you want to start talking about Mother?
First of all, I would make sure that nobody ever puts her trying to measure was she the first most important Indian after Gandhi, was she the third? That brought such crassness to the assessment of greatness that really put me off. Put me off even more because people like me it goes beyond reverence. It goes into a situation of love. And we love her because she made philosophy and compassion and faith so tangible, so tactile. You could touch it. And ideas and concepts which take years to, and you got to go very deep into the faith process to come up with those things. She made it something that was so expected, so as I said, so tangible. You could do that. And secondly, I want to say is, for us in the Catholic world, and I suppose in the Christian world, her journey did not end 15 years ago, because another journey began 15 years from in the past, which is the process of getting her sainthood, which is nothing. I mean, if she'll become a saint, she won't change materially, she'll still remain the same. But this is again making it more tangible. It's when she becomes a saint, she's a blessed, she becomes a saint, there'll be somebody who will now have a definition that we've always put on her, even when she was alive. Navin mentioned that she was a saint in her lifetime. And to give it a sense of perpetuity, timelessness, the process is there. So for us, it's been a loss, but she lives on. And she lives on in each one of her sisters. She lives on in the manner that she has changed faith itself. The church has changed because of her. Our social activism has changed because of her. Our definition of compassion. We are no longer afraid to touch the poor, the weak, the ill, the dying. I think that's very important.
I think that's a very well, well said. Navin Chawla, I have a confession. By the time I came into this profession, Mother Teresa had possibly achieved everything that you can possibly say in terms of official recognition. She had won the Nobel Peace Prize. The Indian government had given her a Bharat Ratna. I think it was almost just about a year or a year and a half after she had been given the Bharat Ratna that I kind of stepped into this profession. You had met Mother Teresa, I think, for the first time several years prior to that, I think 1974 or 75, mid-70s, the time when you first. I want to hear from you, you having been a biographer, somebody who's interacted so closely with the mother for so many years, want to hear from you, the first time that you met her, how did you find her and how did that meeting change you?
Well, that was it was a very important day in my life. Till a little before that, I hadn't really heard of Mother Teresa too. I mean, I read about her in the papers, but it wasn't she wasn't somebody whom I really wanted to meet or anything like that. One day, the wife of the principal of St. Stephen's was over, and she spoke about Mother Teresa. And 2 weeks later, just 2 weeks later, Mother Teresa happened to write a letter to the Lieutenant Governor, whose secretary I was at that time. It was torn out of a child's notebook, but in very strong handwriting. Antara, you know that handwriting. She invited the Lieutenant Governor to open a small home for the elderly disabled. And I accompanied the Governor that morning and felt very ashamed because we went in a big car and there were outriders and this sort of thing. And then we were confronted with Mother Teresa, small even then, 3 or 4 other sisters, simple, the elderly poor in their cots. And I noticed Mother Teresa for the first time. Her hands were twisted in like this, a little. Her feet were also gnarled. Even then her back was bent a little. And she immediately struck me as the epitome of the arduous life that she led in the streets and the slums, not just of Calcutta and India, but the world. And from behind her, I could notice that her sari was neat and clean, but it was darned in many places. And clearly this wasn't a Rolls-Royce guru. And she was no different from the poor. She and her sisters struck me as being no different from the poor with whom she tended. That had a great impact on me, and it's, of course, obviously never left me in all those years.
Antara, I would want to know from you, your personal associations, how, when did you meet her, what and how in a way did it impact you?
When I was very, very little, actually. That was also just before she got the Nobel Prize. I was very young, and I had heard of her and I wanted to meet her. So I got hold of a family friend who said that he knew Mother Teresa. I was about 10 or 11 at that time. And I saved up whatever little money I could, you know, it was like 5 rupees, 2 rupees, you know, 30 years ago or more, it was a lot of money.
Money at that time.
Yeah. And I got to the grand sum of 300 rupees, which was like a small fortune,
Yes.
which I wanted to give to Mother Teresa. And so this person, he actually took me along with him, and I met Mother Teresa, and in that setting where there were people lying on the ground, actually, in little makeshift beds, and Mother tending to them and all of that. So the first time she came out onto the little veranda and sat on a bench with me and talked to me for a while, and I said I wanted to volunteer, and she said, "Oh, you're too little to volunteer, you need to grow up a bit."
Yes.
And so I said, all right, I'll grow up and come back. So which I did. I went back in a couple of years, and she said, okay, go to the children's home. And I was about 12 or 13 then, and she said, go to the children's home and play with them, read to them, and that would be of huge help. I said, no, I want to go to the elderly person's home, because I know that you don't have enough volunteers for the older people, and you have a lot of volunteers for, was it Nirmal Hriday? Shishu Bhavan, yeah, for Shishu Bhavan. So she was absolutely adamant. She said, no, you will not go to Shishu Bhavan. You will go to Shishu Bhavan, you will not go to the elderly home. And this, so that was a standoff. I wouldn't go to Shishu Bhavan because I was determined to go to. I said I can do the same thing. I can read. I can read to them. I can play with the older people. But that's where you need people. You were fairly
insistent that you wanted to go to the.
Yeah, because that was where she actually needed people. And then later on, much later, it never happened because she wouldn't allow me to go there, and I wouldn't go to Shishu Bhavan. Much later, she actually told me that. In fact, she told a family friend that she thought I was far too sensitive and emotional. Okay. And if I went to the older people's home, I would be confronted with death of people that
for which you possibly were not prepared to see.
Yeah, she thought that I wouldn't be able to.
Well, I think what you were saying actually brings out a very sensitive dimension of her personality. It is time for us to take a small little break. We'll come back and resume this conversation. Mother Teresa came to India as an 18-year-old and joined the Sisters of Loreto, an Irish community of nuns with missions in India. What made her leave the convent and devote herself to working among the poorest of the poor in the slums of Calcutta? We'll talk about this when we come back. Stay with us.